Hi, my name is Angel Celeb. I'm an itinerant vision teacher with Southwest Co-op, and I travel between 7 schools, and I have about 15 students or so. I spend most of my time here at Lamont High School. I have a totally blind student who is fully academic, and he is in all of his classes are regular classes. They're not special ed classes per se. I do, in his algebra class, which is all regular ed students, he is in there every day of the week. We have a block schedule, so classes are usually every other day for most classes. With his algebra class, he has it every day. And I'm in that class with him, supporting what the rest of the class is doing. We sit in the back of the room at a small table where I can reiterate what's being put on the board or what other kids might say or things that are being presented. His math teacher does a really good job of trying to verbalize everything she's doing on the board. Every now and then she forgets, so I just kind of try to remind her, or I'm there as a backup for Brandon to remind him and to reteach concepts as we're going along. That way he's not missing out on anything. We're not having to slow down. I really don't cut down his work. He does just as much as everybody else, sometimes even more, because he does have a whole period of vision resource with me every other day, which is an hour. These are hour-and-a-half periods, so we have that time, which I use for not only my vision goals, but also to reteach algebra or any concepts he's missing out on, work on special projects in his other classes, things like that. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Can you summarize some of the difficulties Brandon has had with mathematics? What are some of the major challenges?
Major challenges in math, I think, would be, especially when we come across visual concepts, there are things like factor boxes, which is a visual thing. It's a graph, a chart, where you're trying to factor out trinomials, binomials, whatever, and you're using a factor box. It's a very visual kind of thing, not necessarily a great tool for a blind kid. Brandon and I have come up with our own system of it where he just puts them in order on the paper. Say you have an x squared, so you'd have x and x would be the factors of that. So he just puts x comma x, and then the next two factors for the numbers within the equation. That kind of thing. Visual concepts are definitely a challenge. Also, just trying to figure out how to present, well, that's more of my challenge, but just having him grasp what the other kids are getting out of the material. Whether it's something that she's presenting on the board. One huge challenge he has in there is nowadays they're using these graphing calculators, which I never had when I was in school. And they pretty much do everything for the kids. They don't have to think as much. They don't have to do the calculations. They have these things pop up on the screen. They just plug it in and it pops up and then they write it down on their paper, which I think they're missing out on some basic math skills that those of us who had math earlier on or back in the day, we gained more of that because we didn't have the graphing calculator. So he's missing out on that part of it. Usually during that time in class, we'll spend time just reteaching what's going on or trying to come up with a different method of presenting what's going on.
How have you tried to overcome that problem of not having a graphing calculator for him? What have you done? What do you do?
I try to use a lot of tactile materials, raised line graph paper if we're graphing an equation. We use that a lot. He uses the calculator function on his Braille Lite whenever he has calculations he needs to do. He discovered the fraction mode without me teaching it to him, so that was a really plus for us both. His Nemeth skills are pretty good, so we use Nemeth code in the Braille. I want him, he uses a Brailler in math class as well because I want him to get that instant feedback and that the response of his own materials, his own responses are right there in front of him without having to translate, transcribe, that kind of thing. So,
what would you say, what do you do when he runs across new math symbols? How do you handle teaching him the name of the code as you're moving along through the class?
I keep a cheat sheet with me so I can remember the Nemeth code, and I'll tell him the symbol right then and there, or if he comes across one in a book, he'll usually ask me about it. You know, what is this? He's really good at picking up on that stuff, so I don't have to remind him too many times.
So, in a nutshell, when he sees a symbol he doesn't recognize, he asks you, let him know what it is, or look it up, or however, explain it to him. Is that correct?
Yes, I also have an ink print copy of the book in front of me. He has an ink print copy of the book at home. Mom and Dad can help him with that. Or he asks his teacher, hey, what is this supposed to be? I don't understand it. And then he can usually figure out, oh, this is the symbol for this, that kind of thing. So, still has a little trouble with repeating decimals, but then again, who doesn't? So.
Have you had any difficulty getting the books for him for his math class?
Not yet, but I've been told that next year's book is not in Braille yet, so we're going to deal with that.
Are you satisfied with the level of the quality of the Braille in his math books?
Actually, no. About every other page there's an error. So whether it's a number that was mistranscribed, or it's something's left out, or you know, they screw it up pretty regularly. So.
And so it helps with, obviously, for you to have the ink print version of his math book beside you, so you know.
Absolutely. That way I can reinforce what's there. And we'll try to, when he gets an assignment that he has to take home for homework or something, I'll try to quick run through what are the equations on the page, just let him know, you know, if there's a mistake on there, that kind of thing. We try to do that as much as we can. Not always time for it, but. And like I said, he also has the ink print at home, so if he has a question, he can ask Mom and Dad. His teacher's pretty lenient and understanding too. She realizes that the Braille's not perfect. And just like when I transcribe assignments that I get she does a lot of worksheets in there. So I do all those by hand, and I make mistakes. So, you know, he's pretty good about letting me know about that too. So.
How does the classroom teacher work with you? Do you have some kind of communication system set up? Do you ever have an opportunity to meet with her without, you know, sitting in or interrupting the class? And how has she handled having a Braille reader in her class?
One of the fortunate things is that I am in there the whole time. She'll have, a lot of times she might assign something, the kids are working independently, so we'll converse during those times. Or also they have a really good email system, so she emails me a lot of his assignments. They're already in text format, all I have to do is print them out. If it's something with not a lot of math symbols in, I'll just throw it through Word and Duxbury and do it that way. If it has a lot of particular Nemeth code symbols, then I'll do it by hand. But it helps a lot, the email, because we're constantly back and forth with that. So that communication has really been a definite benefit. But also, she has a resource period second hour every day, so more often than not, she comes down and checks in with me. This is what we're doing tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. You know, just a real quick little 5-minute meeting or something.
That's outstanding. How about his math teacher last year? Was this person as willing to work with you?
No, not at all. And we had very little communication last year. I also was not in his classroom last year. That was something, because initially in his IEP it was that he was to have no support. He only had 150 direct vision minutes when he first came to the high school, whereas now he has 10 times that amount. He's 1,100 minutes a week with me. So that difference. Towards the second half of the year in his math class last year, we did put a special ed aide in there. However, she didn't really have any math background herself, so that made it more difficult. Plus, she didn't have any blindness or Braille experience, so that made it more difficult. But I tried to converse with her and help her out, taught her a few, you know, Braille symbols and just some basic stuff, and taught her, you know, take notes like this, and you might want to repeat this, giving her suggestions. Every now and then I'd go in the class, but the teacher really wasn't very open to that. It also didn't help that she was pregnant, so she was gone for 8 weeks out of the semester as well. So we had to deal with a second teacher at that time too. So
this year's teacher, does this teacher have a different attitude from the start, or is it because you have more time to work with her and so she doesn't have the same pressure that last year's teacher had? What do you think?
I think it's the latter of those two. I think that I'm there to support her and I give her suggestions. I think that makes a huge difference in her comfort level. Because of course, whenever somebody finds out they have a blind student, you get the whole initial freak out. Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to pull this off? And you know, being there, I think it really helps ease their mind and, you know, get them. And also it helps the other kids in the class. They're not as apprehensive about working with him. and they're more willing to help out. And there's been a couple of days when they had assembly days and part of the class would be out of the room, because it's freshmen and sophomores in the class. And so there would be maybe only freshmen in the class and Brandon. So they might have fun days. There was one day they got to play math basketball, and a couple of the kids really took him under their wing and helped him to shoot the baskets and helped him, you know, they're making the noise over by the garbage can because they're shooting paper into the garbage can, and just trying to help him out and pick up on things that they've seen me do in class. So I think by that way, you know, the best way for us to educate the world is to show them what we do. And I think, you know, we're making more teachers. We're growing more teachers, I always like to say. So
Good. That's good. That's great. So your recommendation for other people in your position dealing with Braille readers who are going to be at the secondary level in regular math classes, your recommendation is that someone who knows Braille and understands blindness and is a certified teacher would be supporting that student actually in the math class in order to provide support for the teacher as well as the student?
yes.
So, Angel, you're aware that most vision teachers do not have a background in math, and virtually no general education math teachers have a background in blindness or Braille.
Right.
Do you have any advice for the typical vision teacher in this situation?
Make friends with the math teacher. Make nice with the math teacher, along with all the other school personnel, of course, but definitely try to keep up on what's going on in class. Plan ahead a little bit, check out what you're doing ahead of time if you don't understand something. And it never hurts to have the answer key next to you. So if you can get the answers to the problems ahead of time, it makes it easier to figure out as you're going along.
And how do you make friends with the math teacher?
Being a good support and just trying to remind her and give her pointers on, you want to verbalize this, that kind of stuff. This is how we're going to present it to the kid. Just being a really good support to the math teacher in his or her pursuit to educate the blind student. So mostly it's all about support. And even if you don't know how to do something, knowing where to go to get the answers, or finding somebody else to ask. It wasn't unusual that I could email CAP and say, what's the symbol for this, that kind of thing. So knowing where your resources are really helps.
Do you ever work with any other students in the class or do anything to help this teacher out with other situations in the classroom, or do you
I have helped out other students if they might be doing board work, and in which case Brandon and I are sitting right next to the board. So I usually have 2 or 3 kids standing right next to me, and I'll help them work through their problems if they need help. And they know that they can come to me if they have a question. They do a lot of group work, so I'm right there within the group working on the things and trying to show them how to work with Brandon as well as helping them through the problems. Sometimes it doesn't. I've given them a wrong answer once or twice, but they're pretty lighthearted about it, and they are okay with that.
What kind of contact did you have with this teacher before classes actually started last fall?
I provided an in-service, as I did to all of his teachers, and just in how the whole Braille transcription thing was going to go, and depending on the class, because there's some classes he doesn't need any support at all, and he doesn't use his Brailler in. For instance, like his English class, he doesn't need a Brailler in there. He can do it all on his Braille Lite. He does up his assignments in there and then comes down to my office during Vision Resource, prints them out, turns them in all on his own. So he really doesn't need any support. But just trying to, individually go through each class and say, these are the kinds of things that you might try. This is what I am here to offer. And again, the email system here at the school is fabulous. Teachers are not shy about saying, hey, I need help with this, or hey, can you come up during this class time and work on this with me? For instance, like if it's an internet project or something, I'll go up in the computer lab and sit with him and work on the internet, and also at the same time working on his technology skills. I think that the best thing to remember is just that keep an open mind, and even if you don't get it right away, stick with it. Pursuit. It's all about pursuit and just going for it. And these kids can do this stuff if you give them the opportunity. And don't be shy about telling your administrator if you need more minutes.